Yo, welcome everybody. Oh, we didn't rehearse the whole standing desk thing going up and down.
No, we didn't because it's late and I'm tired.
I know, I'm
I'm not
sorry. Well,
standing up.
welcome everybody to episode 51. I just noticed that as we started.
Yeah, I was
It's
thinking about
episode
that.
51 of the We All Serve podcast. Again, we've broken the 50 mark and just been having some awesome conversations and so excited about these upcoming episodes and so excited for today's conversation. Super timely. I'll talk about our guest in just a moment. But Angel, I know it's late and you've been busy. I can't believe it's already Tuesday. How have you been?
I am fantastic. I'm really, really good. I'm very excited about our guest and some of the guests that we have coming up, including the Warrior Wishes founder, which next week is going to be fantastic. He's a great guy.
It will be. It's great. And I think he's only the second person that we've had on that hasn't worn a uniform, but honestly, it doesn't matter because it's really, as we always say, it's we all serve, and that's what it's all about. So, on that note, all of our episodes, obviously, we're streaming these live on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff. Make sure you subscribe, rate, review, and share, and on your favorite podcast app, Google, Apple, Spotify, really, frankly, anywhere where there's podcasts, just search for We All Serve, and you'll find it. And join the many. Angel, Tina watches or listens to these, so join Tina in listening.
Hopefully, she's my social victim, and then she'll go, did you really need to wear that shirt? Did you need to?
Yeah.
But make sure if you're in a veteran organization and people are kind of on the outs or don't have a sense of connectedness with the community, turn them on to the podcast. They can hear from the rest of us and realize that they're not alone, and we're all kind of just figuring our way in the world.
Very true. And honestly, I walk away each and every week that we do this inspired by the people that we talk to.
That's why we keep coming back every Tuesday.
We keep coming back. And the leadership lessons, and there's so many lessons. I have a lot of folks that tune in, on LinkedIn and things like that, and they haven't worn the uniform, and they're just like, wow. They're inspired, and it has lessons learned for them in their professional careers and so on. And that's what it's all about. So with that, I don't want to keep us away from him because there's a lot of stories to share. There he is up there on the screen, Mr. Peter Braxton, my good friend. He is the managing director of Akoya Capital, investor relations. Peter's been serving the financial needs for I like that term, ultra high net worth individuals and their families for more than 14 years. Delivering holistic advice and creative solutions across the spectrum of private capital markets. But very interesting, earlier in his career, Peter was a U.S. Air Force instructor pilot with over 3,000 flight hours, including 1,000 combat hours in Iraq and Afghanistan. And following that military service, he joined Credit Suisse, Chicago, as a private banker. From there, he was a chief operating officer and chief of staff. Some really, really interesting business experience. And he's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, distinguished graduate of Joint Specialized Undergraduate Pilot Training, and he has an MBA from Washington University in St. Louis. He currently serves on the board of the Tuskegee Next Foundation and is a private pilot in a Citation 7 out of DuPage Airport in West Chicago, Illinois. And we're going to talk about why this conversation is so timely. But welcome to the pod, Peter Braxton.
Angel, Shalom. So glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
That's awesome. It's awesome. I always defer the first question over to Angel, and we've just been talking about your background, and just really exciting to have you on.
I just want to know how many carrier landings you have.
Carrier. So let's back up a little bit. U.S. Navy. There it is.
I know. I'm just busting up.
I get the question. Air Force pilots like terra firma. We like the solid earth.
That's it. And per diem.
Also part of the program. So.
I'm not mad at you.
Also part of the program.
Well, I just got to know. I mean, I understand your background, being a pilot, and I was curious as when you Air Force Academy. It sounds like you've been drinking a Kool-Aid for a while in the Air Force and flying and doing what everyone aspires to do in the Air Force. And then you make the transition through B school and stuff. When did I want to be in wealth management kind of perk your interest?
Well, you got to remember the military, and you guys both know this, does a couple of things well. It does some things not so well. But two of the things it does well, in my opinion, is it's incredibly good at training people. I mean, it kind of almost has, I hate to say it, like an unlimited budget, but if you fire for effect, you miss the target, they're gonna teach you. They're gonna give you another round, and you can go shoot at the target again. The kind of same thing happens when you're flying a plane. If you're a student, you miss the runway, they tell you go around and try it again. They tell you what you did wrong and you try it again. The second thing it does is it gives young people a tremendous amount of responsibility extremely fast. And one of the issues that I had, kind of transitioning through B school is where can I go? Like, what job can I take in the civilian world will just have that kind of commensurate amount of responsibility, sink or swim at an associate level, right? So you're coming out of B school, typically an associate. And private banking and wealth management is kind of the one I settled on, right? So anywhere else you go, you're going to have a boss's boss, a boss's boss's boss. You sink or swim in the kind of the wealth management world. Either you can empathize and communicate thoughtfully to operators and entrepreneurs about what the next chapter of their life looks like after liquidation or exit, or even partial liquidation or exit, or you can't empathize, right? And so one of the things you have to do, quite frankly, is you have to start your own business, right? Win, lose, or draw, you will speak the vocabulary. You will understand what they kind of went through with respect to risk, pressure, kind of wearing multiple hats to really create that type of value that some of these entrepreneurs and operators generate.
Wow, that's interesting. And it really resonates with, I had a couple of my classmates that were in the same line of work, and they spoke very intensely about the importance of building those authentic relationships where you're part of the family, and when major family decisions are made, they're just embedded. And one thing that they have valued is the military background kind of has that almost a cut above, like people really kind of want to trust you, have a reason to want to trust you. Whereas,
well, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It is a lot about trust, and it's a lot about kind of likability. But more than that, there's two skill sets that really aren't taught in school. And one of them is kind of finance, like how to deal with money and make money. It's not really taught in school. And even in business school, you'd think, man, that's what they teach. No, it's not really taught. The second thing, even in business school, is networking, right? You don't see networking being taught in kindergarten or third grade or sixth grade. And it's really left to its own devices of like the sports system, the high school sports system, to try to develop leadership, networking, peer leadership, which is, we all know is extremely difficult. But those environments really kind of teach that. And I was lucky enough to have access to some of those opportunities in team sports growing up to understand how important it is to try to, talk to people, understand, empathize, and then of course lead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to take it back to when you went into the Air Force Academy. What propelled you to go in that route? Do you come from a military family? Let's take it a couple of years back.
Sure. So let me back up. My father was in the military. He was in the Air Force. He was a veterinarian technician. He was a non-commissioned officer. And right around the time I was 15 years old, I remember him kind of sitting me down, kind of having a man-to-man talk and saying, look, you should serve this country before you enjoy this country. You will look back on your service fondly. And by that, he didn't say, now you got to go join the Marines or the Air Force or even apply to the Air Force Academy. He was like, look, service is what we're all here for and what we're all about. And it really is a part of my DNA. I would love to say that the military is the organization that instilled these kind of core values into me. But now it was my parents, right? My parents kind of taught me. My mom, I remember, kind of pulling me aside one day and, your purpose in life is to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. Yeah, that's what I'm raising you to do. And I think it takes a very special mom to say something like that. But ultimately, I guess they had the same conversation with my older brother. He ended up going to the United States Air Force Academy. He went to Penn Medical School. He also went to Carnegie Mellon Tepper School of Business. He is the only neurosurgeon in Eagle and Summit County, Colorado. And so for all of my accolades, I mean, my brother kind of walks on water and I swim underneath it. But I did follow him to the Air Force Academy. We're both there at the same time. He's a 97 grad and I graduated in 1999.
That's wild. That's crazy. And you were in for how many years?
So I count the United States Air Force Academy as being,
of course you would.
Okay? I'm telling you,
You wore a uniform.
it is military.
People told me what to do. It counts.
It is one of the hardest military schools in the universe. It is the real deal. I can't really think of any other military school that is harder. I know the West Point and Annapolis folks are probably, they have a vote, but United States Air Force Academy is quite possibly the toughest military school academy in the world. And so I even forgot the original question. You got me so charged up, but
how many years were you in?
Okay. Total 12 years. So you have an 8-year active duty service obligation. I think they switched it to 10 for rated officers. I was grandfathered into 8. I had the 4 in from the academy and I come up with 12. Well, curiously enough though, I graduated on 2 June, 1999, and my date of separation, if you're in the military, everyone kind of remembers that date, was 2 June 2007 on the button.
Crazy. Wow. So we're going to talk about some of your experience flying, because that was actually, honestly, what I've been meaning to have you on for a while, Peter. But you recently penned a piece for Chicago Magazine, and that sort of pushed me along to let's make this happen as soon as possible. But Peter, I asked this of all of our guests that have worn a uniform. Tell us about your best friend or greatest mentor from your time in service.
Gosh, my best friend has to be one of the first people I met in the military. It usually ends up being that way because you're both thrown in this incredible adversity, and it really, if you don't get along, it's chaos. It descends into chaos, and we ended up getting along. He was the punter for the United States Air Force Academy, Jason Kirkland. Bar none is someone I look up to. He was my roommate. We got there at the same time. He's from South Carolina. I'm originally from upstate New York. And I remember, saying, you kind of talk funny. And he didn't skip a beat. He's like, no, you talk funny, with his, Charleston kind of Mount Pleasant drawl. He's currently, believe it or not, fellas, the commander. I don't even know if I can tell you, the commander of Air Force One, the special airlift mission out of Andrews Air Force Base. In the DC area, and I was at his change of command. I got a tour of Air Force One with my then.
No kidding, that's cool. So those are rare because Secret Service mandate regulates those.
They absolutely do. No electronic devices. You can't take pictures. I'll tell a really quick anecdote. It just tells you how kind of rambunctious and mischievous I am. We're getting a tour, and all of a sudden I'm in the bathroom of Donald Trump. This is a couple of years ago, in the bathroom, and I see his cologne, and I'm like, oh, look, kind of want to smell his cologne. And I asked politely, am I allowed to smell his cologne? And they said no. Looked me directly in the eye. I picked it up and I sprayed it in the air, kind of like I was at Neiman Marcus, and I walked through it. Just missed it.
What's it called? Ode to winning.
It was ode to some Parisian something. And I'm telling you, it's not my. I'll leave it here. It's not my sense. Doesn't mix with my essential oils. I'll tell you that. It smelled like log.
Like lumberjack.
And so
that's
my
great,
mentor,
man.
Let me back up. So my best friend Jason, flip of a hat, he would be here. I'll be there for him. My mentor, was I wouldn't say mentor. Is a guy who influenced me the very most in my pilot career. When you fly poorly or you fly well, you end up flying with the squadron commander, right? So they're always trying to figure out what, I don't know, you call it the this, third standard deviation. Why is this person doing so poorly? We need to make them better. What's going on? And if you're doing really well, I want to see, like, why is this? So I was doing really well. Quite proud of myself. I am a distinguished graduate of SUPT out of Laughlin Air Force Base, Texas. And I ended up flying with Lieutenant Colonel Rico Alvarez. And if he's out there, I'd love to reconnect with the guy. But Rico was like a squadron commander, like way above, I mean, boss's boss type thing at Laughlin. And I'm flying with the guy, and he actually had overcome like a speech impediment, a stutter. And he's got all these stories about how he's overcome a lot of things in life. And so I'm flying with him, and I think I'm doing, well, as good as I possibly can be doing. I'm trying to impress this guy, and he's like, "Hey, let me take the stick for a minute." And he's flying along, and all of a sudden he jams it, and my head goes flying up. I'm strapped in, but I'm jerked around. It was like intentional super turbulence, and then he gives me back the stick, and he's like, "So that's what it feels like when you fly." Okay? And I was not past demoralized. I was like heartbroken. He's like, "Look, you gotta pretend there's someone back there drinking tomato juice, and they don't want to spill it, right? Don't make these I was making these rapid corrections to stay on altitude. I was doing my cross check really rapidly and trying to keep everything really tight. But no. He's like, "Look, you got to be smooth, like,
super precise, super."
I was trying to be very precise.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, check the number. He's like, no. Someone's got tomato. You're spilling the tomato juice. And so, one of my things is when I'm in, when I feel bad, I get really reserved. I get quiet. I get pensive. And he notices this, and we get on the ground. We're walking back, and it really is. It's almost like a scene out of Top Gun. We've got our gear, helmet, parachute, everything's kind of like hanging off you. It's hot, and I'm walking, and he stops me in the middle of the flight line, almost Top Gun style. And he's like, "Look, water off a duck's back. Anything anyone ever says to you, just pretend it's water. Take it, and it just like you have oil, and just let it go. You will not survive, not only in the United States Air Force, but you won't survive in the world if you take everything so personally. I'm here because I love you. You're one of the best pilots I've ever flown." He says this, right? Best, but I had some advice, and that's all I had. That's all I had for you. Everything else was perfect. Water off a duck, and that's kind of the way I've lived my life, right? Everyone is going to criticize you. I'm sure there are people that are going to come out and maybe even question my article or try to poke holes in it. I did as much research as I possibly can. I was one of the first military pilots over New York City on 9/11. And it was my first day of work. It was my first day after graduating initial qualification training on Saturday. My first flight was Tuesday, 9/11/2001. So I was there, and I have some anecdotal stories about, back then there was no smartphone, right? You didn't have this in your pocket. You couldn't take pictures and have all this evidence. I had one of those Kodak plastic cameras.
The little with the thumby thingy, yeah.
Yeah. I had one of those in my flight bag. And that morning, I'm like so nervous. Like, it's my dollar ride. It's my first ride. I like emptied out my flight bag, took out everything out that, that was just extraneous, refilled it back, made it light, sharp, fresh haircut, polished boots. I would have had the only aerial photos over New York City if I kept that camera in the bag that morning at like 3:05 a.m. or whenever alert time was. So
it's crazy. Angel, on that note, and I actually just posted the link to the article on all of our social media channels over here. It's a really good piece, and the title is "A Military Pilot's Look Back in 9/11." Angel, you and I were talking last week on the podcast. We were talking about where we were, and I don't think either of us can say that we were up in the air at that point. I know, Angel, you were talking about your perspective.
I was on my way.
Interesting. Yeah.
I was on a E2 squadron, and as soon as I still had a Chicago Italian beef sandwich. Peter, where are you at right now?
I'm in Chicago. I'm in Uptown.
Okay, so I had a Portillo's Italian beef sandwich in my freaking lunchbox. On September 10th, September 11th, I go to the squadron, and we're in Virginia Beach, and Trade Center 1, Trade Center 2. We go out. Skipper Ricardo says, "Hey, we're going out to meet the GW in Newark Harbor that we've been attacked." So we got an C2 and we caught on. And I just remember them being such an intense focus, an intense sense of purpose. And the word last week got you thrown up, privilege. And I thought that was really adequate. Privilege to be where I told my guys, everyone in the United States wants to be where we're at right now, doing something about what's happening. And I'd like to talk about that, but I also want to ask you if I can go off for a second. You know what? No, we'll talk about that. Let's talk about this point and how you felt that day and all the things that happened after that.
Sure. So I'll just take you through the day as fast as you can, and can rewind where you need to. So, I show up, it's a super early show. Well, the day before, you always do the mission planning. A lot of meticulous kind of work goes into planning things. Anyone who's a pilot knows that plan kind of goes out the window as soon as your wheels are off the ground, or even before if there's maintenance problems. So you really have to be dynamic and go with the flow and try to figure things out and solve things on the fly. Prioritization, time management, are all really critical skills that you need as a pilot. And I can say that today as an instructor pilot, but back then I just wanted to be really prepared. And we were. And guess what? Beautiful day, 10 knot, had perfect winds, not a cloud in the sky, no weather to deal with, right? With instrument conditions. And we took off as a 2-ship. I believe it was 2-2, team 2-2, team 2-3, and flew out to, off the coast of the Atlantic Ocean. Whiskey 105 is like the military operating area. And typically what we'll do, looking back, I know this, you go out there, you will fly in formation, you will rejoin, you'll do a couple turns, and then you'll close in for what's called contact. So I flew a KC-10, mid-air refueling, force extension jet, 340,000 pounds of usable payload for fuel. And you'll do some air refueling, dry contacts. Typically, you won't need to take any fuel from the refueler because you've got your own fuel, but you'll practice that, and then you'll switch. Right, you'll switch. The tail jet will take the lead, usually in some type of echelon turn. It's quicker that way instead of like pushing it up and trying to pass you. And then the other person will come in for some contacts, and then you'll go out and do touch and goes. You'll talk about cargo. You'll talk about all types of things, all types of issues and contingencies and stuff. So, we weren't out there for more than an hour and a half. Maybe you think that's a long time to be on a plane, but there's a lot going on. There was a tremendous amount of going on in terms of radios, crew coordination, systems. Moving fuel. You got to remember when you're taking this amount of fuel, and I think if I remember correctly, it's been a while, that we pump off about 6,000 pounds a minute.
Is it JP5 or JP8?
It's JP8. It's JP8. So maybe it's JP. It was a JP. It's been a while. Okay, the type of fuel. But in any event, 6,000 pounds means your center of gravity is shifting. It's moving very, very rapidly. And if anyone knows anything about kind of aviation, your center of gravity has to remain within limits. Otherwise, the jet becomes kind of uncontrollable. It gets sluggish. It's unresponsive. And it's primarily the engineer's job, but ultimate responsibility rests with the aircraft commander. So let's talk about that person for a second. That day, I can look up his name. I've got the flight records. I probably should. I flew with a lieutenant colonel. And when you're a second lieutenant, anyone above a first lieutenant is like you're scared of. You're just kind of scared of when you're a second lieutenant. When you're a captain or a major, you're not really scared of anyone. Maybe a flag officer. But when you're a second lieutenant, you're scared of everybody. And now I'm flying with a lieutenant colonel who's been there for 20 years. He's probably going to retire there. He's got a full head of gray hair. I do not want to make any mistakes because, one of the things about being in the military, especially being a pilot, every action is graded. You're always being graded. It's not like, oh, you can relax today. Every single action results in some type of grade or mark in your flight evaluation folder. And so I'm flying with this guy, and he's grumpy. He's grumpy. He's not really excited to fly because the most part, when you don't know anything, it's a tremendous workload that you're adding on to the other team, right? And he knows it's going to be a lot because I'm brand new. Distinguished graduate or not, he doesn't care, right? He knows it doesn't matter. Like, you barely even know how to start the plane, let alone fly the plane. But I did graduate.
Your pair of boots with a pulse. Get up there.
Angel, very good. Okay, I call it self-loading baggage. When I was when I was an instructor, I was like, all right, here comes self-loading baggage. Sit there, And so he wasn't really being nice to me. I remember that. Not that was his job, but he did really have a reputation for loving to fly with the new people. Tear them up a little bit, make them sweat. There's some. It's kind of a big frat. You really want it, you want to earn your place there. And so we're out over the Atlantic, and I am on the radios, and call sign Huntress calls our call sign, right? So when you're called on the radios, you answer. Huntress, Team 22, say your state. One Mississippi, two Mississippi. What am I supposed to do? My state, New Jersey, right? Like that's what I say. And yeah, that's what I said. I said it on the radios to air traffic. Everybody heard it. And, looking back, actually after one mission.
Okay, I know what they meant when they said say your state.
Where are you? I said New Jersey. It was my first day. You see this in the article, but it just rolls off the tongue now, even 20 years later. Team 22, Whiskey 105, Angels 26, heading 090, 5 souls on board, or fully operational. They want to know, does the air refueling URC universal receptacle work? Does the boom work? They want to know if it doesn't work. If it doesn't
what they didn't know is that there was a second lieutenant flying.
Well, guess what?
Up bird, down bird.
The lieutenant colonel immediately transfers aircraft control. He gives me the jet. I'm now flying, and he's taking the radios. And what's not in the article is after he makes the correct answer, all of our radios, with 8 radios, 2 HF, 2 VHF, 2 UHF, 2 intercom, they all go off at the same time. Okay. So everyone is talking. They're at different we monitor all of them. And, on day one, if that happens, you have no idea what anyone's saying. After a certain amount of experience, you can kind of tune out, the volume. You can adjust the volume, and you can say, oh, this is who I need to talk to, and this is who I don't need to talk to. But if someone calls me, I can answer, right? Like I understand what you're asking for. So
you guys can multitask out of different ears too. You guys can hear one thing here, and you can hear another thing here, and actually respond. I've seen people do it. It's crazy.
Believe it or not, you can ask my wife. If I'm in a restaurant, I can listen to her, the waiter, and then a conversation at another table simultaneously.
Right.
And I can really take all of that information. It's just a special skill you develop. So, and I can do it. So he takes the radios, and then it's almost at that moment I realized something. As an officer in the military, your job, isn't to fly the jet. It's to manage the mission. It's to manage the people. It's to manage the information, and manage the risk. Flying the jet is actually kind of pedestrian and easy. And to be frank with you, a lot of people would disagree. When you come out of pilot training or even initial qual, the regs, almost better than anyone else. The information in the books, and you can you fly the jet, otherwise you don't graduate. But what you do not know how to do until you've done it is manage the mission and all the task management and all the prioritization of all the different receiver jets and how much fuel you need for yourself to keep for yourself to get to the destination. You assume command of navigation and all of that stuff as a kind of a KC-10 pilot. I can't speak for everyone, but you do, and you just learn very quickly. It's just getting started. So Huntress told us to contact New York Center at a specific frequency and proceed directly to JFK and hold. Now I know how to do that. I know how to put it in the box. I know how to pull up the hold. I probably know how to do that better on day one than a lot of people because I just got tested on all of this stuff, right? The Colonel, Silver Fox, I called him in the article. New York Center gives us pilot discretion 5 to 50,000 feet. I'm going to pause there because none of your listeners have ever heard that before, and hopefully never again, especially over some of the busiest airspace in the world, right? I don't think I'm not kidding, and I could be wrong. I don't think the president of the United States could command that, right? Like it's got to be a special national defense order that everything is grounded now. And you have what's called pilot discretion. That means you can climb, you can descend, you can turn left or right at your discretion without telling anybody. over the busiest airspace in the world. JFK, LaGuardia, Teterboro, Newark, and then all of the traffic that's flowing from Europe in the morning coming into the United States is all gone. And so that's when the weight, right there is when kind of the weight of the moment hit the colonel. After Huntress called, he turns to me and says, "I think someone detonated a nuclear weapon somewhere in the United States." Now, I am a student of history. I did go to school and learn about the last time a nuclear weapon was detonated, not in the United States, but in the world. Like when was the last time it was used, an aggression or for malicious purpose? I was like, man, it's been about 60 some odd years since that's happened. Why would you say that? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. That is not computing, to somebody on their first day of the job. But he was pretty close. Right? If you think about something that's never happened before, these attacks of this type of nature have never happened before. He was pretty close, and that goes to speak to his wisdom and experience. He knew exactly what Huntress was asking for, and he knew the nature of that. So we get to JFK, we enter into holding pattern, and look, we look out the window and we see the smoke. And I guess this will tell you how kind of silly, sad, and young I was. I was like, man, I didn't know New York City was in a seismic zone. I thought it was an earthquake. Because my last kind of vivid memory of seeing something like this national tragedy unfold live was the '89 World Series. I believe it was Game 3 of the Battle of the Bay, the Oakland A's and the San Francisco Giants. There was an earthquake, and the Bay Bridge collapsed, and there's smoke rising, and Al Michaels was, talking about it, and the game was postponed, and everyone's crying and hugging each other. I remember seeing that as probably whatever I was, a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old. And so I was like, oh man, I just didn't know. I thought the seismic fault zones were over in the West and somewhere around the world, but not in New York City. Well, then we started getting some reports that, a plane had hit the towers. We also got some reports that a plane had hit the Golden Gate Bridge. We got some reports that the plane had hit the Department of Treasury. We got reports that the plane had hit the White House. And like this, but none of that information was obviously true, except for the World Trade Center. There was mass confusion. The good news is, you compartmentalize in the military, and you execute the task at what you're supposed to do. And that day it was combat air patrol, right? Close air support, combat air patrol, refuel the fighters that were now inbound or on station to patrol the Hudson and the East River. So 100% of the fighters that you saw on TV flying around New York City on 9/11, I refueled 100% of those guys. I know who they are. The Otis Air National Guard F-15s, and there were some F-16s from the Atlantic City Guard as well that came in and kind of either relieved them or augmented that force. We stayed there all day, I want to say for 14 or 16 hours over New York. And then we were directed off station to go back to McGuire because there was another jet that was replacing us. You have to have this fuel in the air because, these planes can't land. And I'm trying to fast forward through it so we can go back if you want to, but we were on like a 30-mile final. And if you're a pilot, and any pilots listen, you never get more than a 4-mile final. Maybe if you ask for it, you might get a 5 or 6 mile final or something like that. But it was eerie. That was another thing that I noticed that was crazy. We get on the ground, we open the cabin door, and there's an airman there in full flak. Now, when I took off, Angel, people were eating donuts, they're like kind of high-fiving each other, talking about the Giants game or whoever's going to play, the Bears or the Jets or something like that. When I landed, it looked like Red Dawn. I mean, full body armor on all these people, M16s.
Yeah.
We landed in a different time. I mean,
where did you land at?
Back at McGuire, where we took off.
That's right.
Yeah. And so one of the other things that wasn't really, maybe it was in the article, but having been in the military, at least the Air Force Academy, you see a lot of flybys. You go to a lot of static displays and air shows. You never see like live ordnance on an airplane over the United States. I mean, I'm sure they fly directly to their drop zone, release some dummy bombs or whatever. But you never, when these jets pulled up next to ours to get the fuel,
they were loaded.
loaded. Loaded with a double LA loaded. I mean, I don't Sidewinder, JDAMs, all types of bombs and missiles and optical guided, bomb, because, well, number one, they were on alert, right? They're guarding the ADIZ, the Air Defense Interception Zone. They got alerted, and it wasn't a drill, right? We do a lot of operational readiness exercises in the military, and we always say, training exercise, because you don't want people to get hurt trying to train. But, they launched, and it was a real world thing. It was my first day. I had no idea. Everyone asked me, were you nervous? Did you feel like it was a crisis? I didn't know to be nervous.
Right.
I didn't know enough to know, that there was a jet maybe that coming trying to take us out. I didn't know we were at war. I just said, okay, I guess, this is it almost to be honest, and it almost seemed like a normal day, because this is how my new normal, right? And it became my new normal because, 6 weeks later, we deployed to Al Udeid, Qatar, to prosecute this war on terror, Operation Enduring Freedom and Iraqi freedom. And I ended up spending my entire career at combat.
Yeah.
I'll pause there.
I wonder, your instructor, when at any time during this whole time, I will say 6 years out, that you had a chance to go back and talk to your instructor pilots, the ones that trained you and made you that ready for that day at that time, still, with your butter bars on, still with the price tag is still on your uniform, and you're going down range, and they're like, we trained this guy to do what he needed to do to protect the country. And that must have filled them with an immense sense of pride, saying, we did our job.
Well, it fills me with an immense sense of pride that there's continuity, right? So if I leave, there's going to be somebody else,
right,
that's just as trained and just as qualified to take my spot. There's continuity, force protection, which is what the American people pay their taxes for. I do have conversations about it, but you got to remember, there were only 2 or 3 pilots over in New York right then and there. Right. Everyone else probably maybe had some time to think about it or prepare themselves or really try to absorb the information from the news outlets. There was no internet in the cockpit at the time. There was no Facebook or Skype or YouTube. I've done my homework and research to try to look back and see if I could, find some tapes. And I have found some air traffic control, NORAD tapes, transcripts on YouTube. I have found some interviews from other pilots saying, what'd you do when you got there first? And they're like, well, just so happened to be a tanker, on a training mission, and we refueled. So I was able to do some homework and research, but, looking back, again, I started the conversation saying that the military is incredible at training people. I would put their training up against anybody's. Right? I was ready to go day one.
Go on, Shalom.
Yeah, it's just an incredible story, and I mean, like you said, I'm just blown away by how different the world was from the time you took off to the time that you landed, and what you experienced. And that's, I mean, that was your first day on the job. So I mean, it goes without saying that as you've been discussing, I mean, your career changed. Your career changed. You entered into the Air Force in obviously everybody that joins, you're prepared to to die for the country. I mean, ultimately, but you entered into a non-wartime period, and you were, on your first day on the job, you knew, and more importantly, your boss knew, that this is war. So what you were in for 6 years, and Angel just started alluding to it. What lessons learned that have you been able to apply in leadership in your subsequent career?
Yeah.
And I also want to ask and add to that question of, would you do it all over again?
Good question. So I'll start with the first question, lessons learned, and I'll talk about 3 that I actually learned in pilot training, because I was not the best pilot, but I was the distinguished graduate. So I wasn't the best pilot. There were better pilots than me. But there are 3 things that I did, I think, that kind of separated. And if you add up the cumulative score, I guess somebody voted for me or whoever it was, the instructors or the other students as number one. But I assure you, there are better pilots than me out there. Number one, I went into the Air Force trying to be a physician like my brother. He was always my hero. And talk about, best friends and heroes. He is up there as number one or number two. But he told me, he's like, Pete, you can always be a doctor. You can never fly again. Here's your chance. Like, if you pass on this, you're not going to get that chance. And I passed, and he didn't say he regretted it, but he was giving me brotherly advice. So I ended up going to pilot training, having never wanted to be a pilot, right? Like, a lot of people are sitting on their daddy's shoulders, pointing at planes at 3 years old. That wasn't me. I wanted to be a doctor. When I got to pilot training, I noticed something. These instructors, all they want to do is go home to their, wife and kids. It's their job. And here you are, these like little students, cadets, if you want to, and you're trying to kill the guy or gal, right? Like, you're not putting the gear down. You're overspeeding the jet. You're pulling too many G's. You're trying to, open the cockpit when you shouldn't be opening the cockpit, behind another plane when there's jet blast. And so what I started doing was I just started talking through the maneuvers, right? If you have an entry maneuver, like, an Immelman or Cuban 8, or you're going to perform a maneuver, all they're wondering is, does this person know what's coming next, right? Is he or she going to execute? And I would just talk. I was like, all right, we need to be 8 degrees nose high, enter the maneuver at 250 knots or greater, clear left, clear right. You want to make sure the airspace is clear. You don't want to hit anything else. I would just talk through that. And all of a sudden I remember, you got to remember, you have full oxygen mask, helmet on. You can't see their facial expressions. I could feel their bodies relax a little bit. And instead of being next to the stick and the throttle and the speed brake, they would kind of like step back and put their hands in their laps. So I started doing that. The other thing I learned is you truly don't know something until you have to teach it to someone else. Okay. It's just, to learn that at 21 years old or 20 years old, what I started doing, and you got to remember, these environments are highly competitive. Everyone wants to be number one. Number one person gets their first pick. Number two, pick second. Number 39 picks the last plane that's available, and that's what they get, right? It's one of those deals. Well, I people would start coming in and say, what are you doing? Why are you, your grades are all on the board for the earth and everyone to see. I was like, well, this is what I'm doing. And I'd start teaching people. And know what I noticed? I was doing things wrong, because other people would say, well, why would you enter that, that maneuver at that angle or that speed when you've got, I was like, oh, you're right. And you don't get that information unless you disclose it to somebody else, right? So the third thing in pilot training that I remember learning is pure leadership, like leading people you have no station over, no rank, no grade, no age over, and trying to get all these people to do something together, right? They call them superordinate goals, right? Two or more groups of people trying to accomplish a singular goal. Takes a tremendous amount of empathy and leadership. So that translated well to combat, and I'll tell you why. You got to remember, when you're an officer, you're second lieutenant, you're 23 years old, you're ranked higher than 90% of the military on day one, okay? And, everyone stratifies. There are great pilots, there are terrible pilots. There are great engineers, there are terrible engineers, and there are but all these people are, most of them are older than me. Not all. There's some 17-year-old and 19-year-old airmen, but a lot of them are older than me. And so as a 23-year-old, you don't have the same problems that a 38-year-old master sergeant has, right? You might be getting divorced. He might have money problems, trying to send his kids to school or even college, right? They're almost your age. And I just remember thinking, if there's a problem, and I want them to be able to come to me and tell me and get it off their chest. And if there's anything I can do, I'll do it. But I need you focused on the task at hand. And when you go down to combat, it's even worse. Now, I remember, and you guys may or may not, Angel, you look like you can, and Shalom, I can't tell, but there's this thing called calling cards. There was no Skype back then. You had to scratch the back of that bad boy, and then call an operator and dial in all these like 64 numbers just to kind of patch through and talk to someone in the US. It
was like $1 a minute too. It was expensive as hell.
Oh, I remember calling cards. Just saying, I do.
And so people would call, just to say hi to their baby girl who's 11 or 14. They miss them like crazy. And I'll tell you, I remember having this speech in front of my whole crew, and the crew can be anyone from 3 to 6 to 9 or more people that you're in charge of. I said, look, my job here is not to fly the jet. My job is to get you home in the same condition you arrived, on time or early. And that is what I promise to do for each and every one of you. And if you say that, the rest takes care of itself. Everyone falls into place. They say, you understand what I want. I want to be safe. I will say this, and maybe this is a controversial statement.
And we'll be the team member that says, I don't want that. Like, everybody just kind of looks like, the hell?
Yeah, right. Everyone. This is a controversial statement. Nobody wants to go to war. War is terrible. I mean, if you really, really want to go to war, there's something's up. Something's up with you, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. It's terrible. You're putting your I've been shot at. There are 4 times that I almost died flying. 2 were in training. 1 was a regular old flight, like just, I was flying to Alaska to Anchorage, and all of a sudden there was a terrible storm, and that's a different story for a different time, but equally entertaining, I promise the audience, is this one. And once was at war, and it had nothing to do with the enemy. There were so many coalition coalition aircraft, Army, or not Army, Navy, Marine, Air Force, Netherlands, Australian, German aircraft up there, that it was almost like fireflies. I mean, it was fire. And you got to remember, when you're in combat, you're a tactical. You turn off all your lights and all your emitters. Why? Because you don't want the enemy to see you and shoot you down. So you turn all that stuff off. And it was literally,
you still have IFF on, though, right?
You do, but it's also scrambled.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
So AWACS can see it; they can see where you are.
Yeah.
But we don't want the guys on the ground who have a little IFF machine saying, "Oh, you know what? You thought you
that's Johnny. Get him."
Yeah. It's all secrets. We have these secret things that we plug into the plane and scramble all of this information, so no one could see these emitters. And once that happens, the rules of aviation kind of go out. Not traditional airmanship, but aviation, like FAA, go out the door. You're climbing, you're dodging, but I've been shot at. I just turn, I go. I don't ask. I retrograde. I make the maneuver, and I try to get out of there. So there's a lot of components to this, but you asked about lessons and things learned. And your last question was, would I do it over again? Gosh, that's a tough question. I tell people, I gave, my brother calls it the lost decade. I gave a decade of my life to this
12
country.
years, including the academy.
Well, I get, there were people who are, 23, they're playing video games. I'm out there fighting a war, right? There are people advancing in the world of finance as analysts, and, they're, getting into the great business, and then come out and they're, and they're 27 years old, and they're making, all these dollar bills. But the thing about military people, the things that we really understand, that's really kind of ingrained in you, is this concept of what I call delayed gratification. Delayed gratification. And in simple terms, it's like a dog sitting there waiting for you to say, okay, here's the bone, right? Well, in the military, I always remember, hey, I'm here to serve my time, but one day I want to enjoy that country the way my father told me I would. And I want to look back at my service fondly. And I do. All right. I try not to make comments, political or otherwise, about subject matters I just don't know. I don't know what it's like to be a woman with a baby. And what I don't know what that's like. I can't really make a comment, here or there. But I do know what it's like to go to war. And if someone says, war is easy, or war, I'm like, no, it wasn't. You weren't the same war I was at. But you got to remember, it's all relative. The guys in the Revolutionary War were like, man, I don't have boots. I'm marching around in Valley Forge. My feet are cold. This sucks, right? And the guys in the trenches in World War I were, man, the gas is coming over. It's coming in the trench. I got it. I don't even a can of bean. I don't have a can opener for my can. This sucks. The guys in Vietnam were like, man, these mosquitoes, this napalm, all this sucks. You know what sucks? Wearing MOP 4 chemical gear, over Iraq, trying to prosecute a war and carry that stuff around with no food. I once ate, Angel, you'll know, I once ate 4 MREs. And I know the Marines are like, you lucky you got an MRE. I once ate 4 MREs in a row because we were airborne for 19 hours, right? And it wasn't healthy. It wasn't a healthy experience.
I bet you were locked up for a month.
Usually in the Army we call you the chair force, but I mean you guys were actually the ones that were isolated.
Well, look, but it's all relative, right? And so that's my point. My point is it's all relative. Everyone, it's tough for everybody. Everybody wants to see their family. Everyone wants to grab a beer. General order number 1: no alcohol, no pornography, right? None of that stuff. You don't have access to any of that stuff out there. But it built character. To Angel's point, it built trust, because people respect ultimately what you cannot do. Why are there so many sports fans out there? Well, most of them will admit that they can't hit a 99-mile-an-hour fastball out of the park. Most of them will admit. 1% of them will say, "Oh, you suck. You struck out," right? And I could do better.
Armchair quarterbacks, man. Every Monday.
Right, the armchair on the Monday morning quarterback. But everyone respects something that you cannot do. And I think a lot of people, if they were kind of being honest with themselves, would say, "You know what, Pete, what you did, I couldn't do that." We did it, and I did it with at the pleasure of the U.S. taxpayer.
Peter, I'm going to wrap up, and the one thing I wanted to say and offer was when you mentioned that the whole delayed gratification thing, it really resonated with me. And I used to be an officer recruiter. I recruit pilots and doctors and lawyers and all this stuff. And we'd have these orthopedics surgeons come in after 55 years old because they wanted to serve and they wanted their life to feel like it meant something. Mm-hmm. So my answer to your point, or not answer, but add on to your point was, sometimes it's not about I just want to enjoy the company. Sometimes at the end of my wheel, I call it the rocking chair days, I want to know that my life meant something. My contribution and waking up meant something to the way we live our life mm-hmm. overall. Yeah. And that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, I don't. Everyone asks, would I do it again? Shalom, I think the answer is yes. I would do it again. There were some
in the Navy because he wants to land on carriers.
Negative,
that's why.
Negative. Look, there, but I am proud of my service. All of these, things are factual and true. I've got other stories that make my 9/11 story look kind of silly. There were times where, I tell you that feeling of like your life flashing before your eyes because you think you're going to die, that actually happens. It's not something they made up and put on the movies. It's happened to me. I've seen it happen, but your brain takes over and the training kicks in and you execute and you live. And I think that's all anyone wants.
Shalom.
Angel, yeah, really incredible, Peter. Truly, thank you obviously for your service. Thank you for sharing your story. And I know, as we look back,
we gotta have him back. We're having Peter back. That's just all.
We gotta hear that Alaska story. I want to hear that Alaska story. So we'll make that happen. We're gonna have Peter back. Honestly, we could talk for hours, and we've already gone longer than we usually do. But Peter, incredible. Thank you for all that you continue to do. I know you and I originally connected because we've got a lot of mutual friends, and I know you're involved in a lot of great organizations, and that's actually how I want to end over here. Are there any organizations or causes that you want to give a shout out to?
I actually do. So Tuskegee Next is an organization that gives a path to an aviation career for underrepresented people, right? I mean, if you're somewhere in Chicago or the country and you look up and you see that airplane, most people don't think, man, I could do that. Well, you could. The problem is it's kind of prohibitively expensive for most people. I encourage people to go to TuskegeeNext.org. It's a foundation. It's not for profit. We're here to train people. If you know somebody, a nephew, a niece, a cousin, or if you are listening and you want the opportunity to fly, we will give you that opportunity, right? And we'll give you that path to an aviation.
I think Angel's typing it in on his other screen over there. He's trying to apply.
I appreciate the opportunity to come on. tell my story. Yeah, there it is. It's on the screen. Thank you very much for doing that. Chairman Steve Davis will talk to anybody. We're obviously taking financial contributions, but more importantly, we want to help the kids get given access. It was a great opportunity for me to fly, fight, win, serve, and I want everyone to believe that they can do it, because that's, if the military does anything, it tells you can do it. I mean, if they first they break you down, and then they build you back up brick by brick, and they say you can do it, and most people can. So thanks for that opportunity. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we'll be back next week. Angel, briefly, you want to talk about our next week's guest?
Yeah, Craig is founder of Warrior Wishes, and what they do is they work with different organizations to provide opportunities for service members and their families to attend sports events around the country. And they fund golf events and just do all these kind of outreach opportunities. And they're very, very well represented. And Craig is just probably one of the most genuine, authentic people that I've ever met. Not a veteran, just really loves his country and really loves the service members, wants to do everything he can to serve and support them, and he passes it on to his son. So that was part of the journey, and we'll hear about that next week.
Can't wait. Subscribe, rate, review, and share. We'll be back next week on We All Serve episode 52. Thanks so much, Peter. Thanks, Angel, and we'll see you next week. Bye.